Takedown MMA, our final segment of the day. Evan Herzog of the Fight Magazine, Albert Rosales of Grinders Fitness. I guess we're gonna go out on a limb, and because this when you see this, these fights will already be done. So we're gonna put ourselves out there, be a little vulnerable. We're gonna talk about UFC Fight Night tonight, Austin, Texas, I believe. They're in Austin. That's Cowboy Cerrone versus Yancy Medieros in the main event, but the card as a whole is a good card. There's a lot of a handful of really good fights that I'm interested in. But let's talk about this first one: Cowboy versus Yancy. Cowboy in a must-win situation in my opinion, for the first time in his career. He's coming off 3 losses, and not just 3 losses, but only one of those 3 losses were like super competitive, and that was the Lawler fight, where you could argue that Cowboy won that fight. I thought that Lawler had the first 45 seconds was like terrifying, but Cowboy, I even thought, won that first round even. But regardless, that's in hindsight. He lost that fight. His last fight is the one that really gives concern. Darren Till, he went out of country, fought a young up-and-coming stud who could probably fight at 3 different weight divisions. Cowboy in a must-win for the first time ever, and as a personal fan, as a Colorado native, I hope we see like the in-focus Cowboy tonight.
Well, one thing you can say about Cerrone is he's always going to come in shape. He's always ready to fight. It's just whether his body's going to let him do the things that he's able to do. I think this is a fight of 2 fighters going in the opposite directions. I feel like Yancy right now is riding high, and I feel like maybe Donald's on his way down a little bit. Should be a really entertaining fight if Cerrone fights the way that he's able to. It should be a really interesting fight. I'm kind of leaning towards Yancy a little bit in this. I just think at this point in their careers, I just believe he's the one who's kind of on top of his game right now. But having watched a lot, so Thomas Denny's been down there with Anthony Adams, been down there training with Donald, and I see nothing but good stuff coming from Thomas about how Donald's camp is going. So who knows, man? Maybe we see the old Cerrone come back in. I think a lot of it is just the miles on his body, man. The guy he was fighting so often. It's hard to let your body recover. You're in your peak phase, and then you get to your fight, and it's hard to turn it right back around, fight after fight after fight after fight after fight. And I think that's been an issue for him. He's had a little bit of time off since the Darren Till fight, so hopefully he's recovered and fresh, and his body is good to go. If he's on top of his game, nobody wants to play around with Cerrone too much.
Yeah, one of the best strikers in the world, and people forget how great he is off of his back too. We don't see it a ton, but as dangerous as anybody off of his back. We definitely haven't seen it at 170, because it's kind of either been him knocking someone out at 170 or him getting knocked out. Unfortunately, it's been... But, yeah, I mean, it makes for great fight, great entertainment.
Right.
But I worry that, again, Yancy's on the come up. I agree. He's part of that Hawaiian, that island kind of vibe. You got Max Holloway, a grip of these guys that are coming out of that same fight camp and area, and they're kind of taking the UFC by storm right now. And they're lovable because they all come to fight.
Well, I think that's the thing with those guys down there, and even like when I first started training, coming up, like King of the Cage was really big back then, and watching fighters like Ronald June, I think he fought in the UFC a couple of times too. You used to call him the machine gun. Watching guys like that came out of the Hawaii scene. One thing you could always say about that is win, lose, or draw, you were coming out of there banged up.
Yeah.
Like you weren't going to come out of a fight healthy after fighting somebody like a Ron June or some of these old school guys, that came out of that Hawaii scene, because they were all just physically just going to punish you.
Or even look at the Nick Diaz-BJ Pin fight back in the day, how bad BJ got. People remember how bad he got beat up, but I urge everybody to go back and look at Nick's face after that fight too.
Right.
I mean, that was a war, and I think there were the ambassadors. BJ obviously really put Hawaii on the map, but I think getting back to it, I think it's what I'm afraid of for Cerrone with fighting now Yancy and fighting Darren Till before is he was once a perennial top 5 fighter at either 155 or, as he's shown, at 170. What I don't want to see as a guy that's been following him since the WEC days is such a great character and such a great fighter become a stepping stone, become a launching pad for these young fighters. And you can kind of see how the UFC is booking them a little bit. And I don't know if they're just like think that they can build off him. I don't know how high their confidence is, and that worries me because they keep giving him these, they're up and comers for a reason. It's a business to them. They got to make superstars. What better way to make a superstar than to beat the Cowboy?
Well,
and I don't want. He needs a win to put a stop to that.
Right. And that's kind of that whole gatekeeper status. Like, and we've touched on it before. Like, I hate seeing guys that just stick around too long and they just take a beating. And like to see somebody like Cerrone or any of these guys that have been around a long time and have just done amazing things for this sport. To see them kind of take 2 steps back and go from division contender, from championship contender down to a gatekeeper status, man, it hurts to watch.
So we agree this is a must-win for Cowboy?
Yeah, he absolutely has to win this. And honestly, like, what does this do for his career if he just comes out and flattens Yancy Medeiros? You know what I'm saying? Like, all of a sudden, like, now it's
back up.
There's Cerrone, mark my words. He comes out and wins this KO first round, something like that, he's going to be fighting in 2 months.
Oh, yeah, he'll
it's
be
just
back
Donald.
on it.
It's Donald Cerrone. That's the way he works. I just want him to do well. I want him to do well. He's just done too much for the UFC. And for MMA in general, for him to just kind of fall back into that gatekeeper status or that, that status where you just keep feeding them to all your young lions that are up and coming. I just don't want to see that.
And that's where I kind of, it's a love-hate type of thing with a fight like this because I want to see Yancy. I really enjoy watching him fight. I want to see him propel.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't want Cowboy to lose 4 in a row and have this person from my, growing up in the sport become that launching pad. Because what does he do? He's been such a company man for so long. Him and Dana White have a great relationship, better than a lot of the fighters. Dana's done personal things out of pocket for Cowboy, and Cowboy's really leaned on Dana. Cowboy joined the fighters union and then stepped away from the fighters union when he was like, I shouldn't have done that to Dana. But I don't see Cowboy, my point is I don't see Cowboy jump into Bellator.
No.
And so what do you do if you're Dana? Dana, do you do one of those things like the big nog type of thing where you kind of force retirement? Say, hey, I got a job for you. I know you're worried about finances. That's why you want to fight every 22 days or whatever. But, I maybe I got a job for you. Something like that. Can you see Cowboy going to another organization if he did lose his 4th straight?
Personally, I personally can't see him going somewhere else. And honestly, I wouldn't want to see that, It's been kind of a mixed bag when you look at the fighters who've gone to Bellator, or even the fighters from Bellator who've gone to the UFC.
Yeah, they struggled too.
Even I just saw Will Brooks just got cut. That guy had a title for Bellator, wasn't he? Wasn't he the 155 champion?
He was
for Bellator?
the guy.
And he gets cut from the UFC. That's crazy to me. But Cerrone belongs in the UFC. It's just where do you really see him at? As soon as you get past that top 10 ranking, who are you gonna throw him in there with? I mean, I guess you can still use him as a ticket seller. If you take him to
might become a super
whether it's fights
guy
here in Colorado or fights in Albuquerque or whatever the case may be. You can always use him for that push because he's always going to have fans. But to me, he deserves better than that. So we'll see. I think even if he loses and it's an entertaining fight, it goes the distance. I think he's still okay. I think he's done too much for the UFC to get cut, even with 4 losses.
But do you personally would you want to see him continue?
No, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
You don't want to be that.
The Fedors, the Takanori Gomes. You don't want to be that guy. And even if you look at it, if you take it into boxing, Roy Jones. Man, you're like 6 years past your prime, like 6 years past actually being competitive against good people. So it's just, I get it. You see it everywhere. You see it in all sports. People who just they don't know when to say enough's enough. But in this sport, unlike a lot of
It's
the
a little
other
bit more
sports.
detrimental.
Yeah, man. I mean, you don't want to be slobbering on yourself,
Right.
a year from now.
Well, that, we pretty much took up all of our time on Cowboy and Yancy. How do you see the fight going at the end of the day? Who do you think gets the hand raised?
I think Yancy's going to win. I do. I think in his career he's at a better place right now. But every time I bet against Cerrone, he's come back and made me look like crap. So every time I bet against him, he comes out and shocks somebody and just freaking pastes them. So who knows? Maybe he comes out the way we expect him to. The way we've grown accustomed to him coming out. But I've got Yancy on that one. And there's some other interesting fights on the card too. It's good to
James
see
Vick,
Thiago
Francisco
Alves.
Trinaldo. That's a
Yeah, so there's still some good cards on there.
James Vick, man. So nobody talks about that guy. 12-1. He's on like an 8 or 9 fight win streak. That 155 division is so weird. It's so crazy that he can cut down to it. But we'll talk about James Vick next week. I have a feeling that he might continue rolling. And I'd like to get into him and where he's at in that crazy lightweight division, because he's getting lost in the picture and he's someone not to be taken lightly, in my opinion. But we'll save that for next week. Look forward to the fights tonight, and we'll see what goes down. I think I'm gonna wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm gonna go ahead and take Cerrone in this one. I think he's in a must-win situation. And I think he doesn't want to finish his career out like this. I think whether he talks about it or not, I think legacy at this point, and as most fighters as they get older, it becomes more and more important.
Right.
And I think with the Yancy may get a little starstruck in there too. We saw him give him a Cowboy hat. That's usually what Cowboy does, is try to make it a friendly thing. But Yancy did it at the weigh-ins. We'll see. It's going to be exciting. But we want to thank you for joining us. Another edition of Takedown MMA. Evan Herzog, it's Albert Rosales. You can catch us on ibtv.us, IBTV on YouTube, and Roku TV at IBTV. We'll see you next week.